Can I have your attention, please? May I have your attention, please? Good afternoon, everyone. The President of the Senate, Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Sharon Haba, and I'll be moderating this session on education under the theme, Education. How do we talk about genocide? This session will examine the role of educators and those responsible for various aspects of the education system, be it those who develop the curriculum, those who deliver it, those who document various things, and preserve particularly the genocide memories. This session will have 4 panelists. On my extreme right is the Honorable Minister of Education, Dr. Vincent Biruta. Honorable Biruta has previously been the President of the Senate, a Member of Parliament, and he has held various cabinet positions, including health and infrastructure. On my immediate right is Dr. Kim Simon, who is the Managing Director of the University of South California Shoah Foundation. She has spent the last 19 years working in the field of Holocaust and genocide video documentation and education, and she's currently working in Rwanda with the Rwanda Peace Initiative. On the extreme left is Dr. Naasson Munyandamutsa. He's a Rwandan psychotherapist, and he has done a lot of research in the area of handling trauma and other issues related to surviving after the genocide. On my immediate left is Dr. Victoria Fontan, who is a research professor at the University of Duhok in the Kurdistan region of Iraq. Dr. Fontan, prior to joining Duhok, was a professor at the United Nations University for Peace in Costa Rica, Colgate University in the US, and Sabancı University in Turkey. I would now like to welcome the Honorable Minister of Education to take us through how we talk about genocide as an education system. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you. Honorable President of the Senate, members of Parliament, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored and privileged to be given an opportunity to contribute to this panel, which will be discussing education and how we talk about genocide. And I consider formal education, and if we say how we talk about the genocide, maybe I'll be talking about how we teach genocide in our classroom. You know that education is considered to be a process of transmitting knowledge, skills, and attitudes or values from one generation to another. And education can impact society in both positive or negative way. In fact, the intellectuals or educated people have played, or so-called educated people, have played a negative role in the history of the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda and at all the key stages of the genocide. They were central in the planning and execution of the genocide, and today they are the ones to spearhead the genocide denial movement. And it's another reality that education ought to have a critical role in genocide and mass killings prevention. Education systems involves both formal and informal education, and my discussion will be about formal education and what we are doing in our schools when we talk about the genocide, and what we do to make sure that the kids we are educating will be able to play a role in preventing genocide in our region and elsewhere in the world. I'll start with the content. In the aftermath of 1994 genocide against the Tutsi, it was realized that the pre-1994 curriculum content had over a long time helped prepare the youth and the population in general for the genocide against the Tutsi through distortion of history and promoting ideologies of discrimination and hatred. And after 1994, the challenge facing the government of Rwanda and the Ministry of Education was to design a curriculum at each level of education that is appropriate and comprehensive. A curriculum that is capable of addressing the effects of genocide, promoting healing and reconciliation, and imparting values to prevent genocide in Rwanda and beyond. At primary school level, genocide is talked about in the social studies at different levels of the education. At the lower levels, I mean here primary 1 to primary 3, genocide is not mentioned as such, but children are progressively taught about living in harmony in a family, children's rights and responsibilities in families and schools. They are also taught about the role every pupil can play to promote and maintain peace in the community, as well as the origin of the conflict in school or how to peacefully resolve those conflicts. At this age, pupils learn through games how to promote peace. At upper primary level, from P4 to P6, or grade 4 to grade 6, the above topics are expanded from the pupils and family levels to the district and province levels. And the responsibility of the individuals and families at the district and province levels is specifically mentioned. And all these serve as a foundation to introduce the genocide topic where teachers go in depth, starting with grade 6 level. At this level, the meaning of the terms genocide and large-scale massacres are explained. The causes and consequences of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi and the current reconciliation process are discussed. The comparative studies of genocide which took place in other countries, such as the Holocaust, are used in teaching. And at secondary school level, the topic about genocide is expanded largely to different subjects, such as history and civic education. And these different subjects, the origin of the genocide ideology is deeply explained, the execution phase of exterminating the Tutsi, and the consequences of genocide in various domains, political, social, economic, and cultural. Unity, peace building, and reconciliation are also fully explained at this level. And reconciliation, peace building are taught as a good solution to eradicate all kinds of discrimination and disparity to prevent conflicts. After I have talked about the content, let me talk about the learning approach. The participatory approach to learning is the methodology which the Ministry of Education has initiated and is focusing on the development of individual talents and capacities and ensures that both the teacher and the students interact through discussions and debates on historical issues, including some controversial ones. The aim is to encourage both the teacher and the students to play their role in addressing common issues. They also develop analytical and critical thinking skills to analyze issues and find solutions. Another way we use to teach about genocide is through what I can call a response to bad practices of injustice and discrimination. It's good to teach pupils in classrooms, but it gives more impact when you live what you are teaching. Before 1994, there had been practices in the education system that had a negative impact on our society. And those practices include unfairness in students' assessment, characterized by subjectivity towards ethnicity, regionalism, gender, nepotism, and so on. It was also about denying the liberty to study a program of your choice and capability. The government of Rwanda assumed, after 1994, a responsibility to reverse these bad practices. This was through enacting of laws that promote fairness and transparency, universal access to education, and address all forms of disparities in our society. The objective was to have a generation of children growing up, knowing and enjoying their rights, and to ensure that they embrace the values they can transfer to other generations to come. At other levels, at a higher educational level, we are building our capacity in teaching and research. We have a master's degree program in genocide studies, which is conducted by the University of Rwanda Center for Conflict Management. And we have also put in place mechanisms to strengthen the history department at our university to make sure that we have the capacity to write about our history, to make research, and to be able to teach the young generation. All these efforts combined, the more should bring about desired changes, and specifically in the capacity development of our people as we seek solutions to the consequences of the genocide against the Tutsi. Now let me go to the challenges we are facing in teaching about genocide. The main challenge is related to the lack of capacity in teaching genocide. There is limited capacity in the teaching of genocide at all levels. Indeed, the teachers we have in our system don't have the expertise on how to teach about the genocide. In fact, those who have planned and executed the genocide could not have been the same people to plan how to handle its consequences. In an attempt to teach genocide, we are always confronted with a number of questions. What is the right age for a pupil to start learning about genocide? Do you talk about everything? At what age do you start talking about certain things? Which learning aids can you use for different age categories of pupils? Can pupils visit a memorial site? And if yes, which images can they be exposed to? And which ones can they be restricted to access? Those are some issues we are facing on a daily basis, and I have to confess that we have not always the right answers. So, facing those questions, sometimes it leads us to improvise with the risk of being emotionally driven in the process and leading to other unforeseen consequences. The other challenge is related to the teachers and the learners themselves, and the interaction challenge. It is a challenge that you have in our classrooms, students, pupils, and teachers who have been exposed to the genocide in a way or the other. Some of them will be survivors, some others would have relatives who have committed genocide and who are in jail today or have just come out of prisons, and that is a challenge. And the problem is that in our society, all the Rwandans, teachers, learners, or everybody has in a way or another be confronted to genocide consequences, and that is a challenge. So the classroom interactional process in the teaching of genocide studies is facing that challenge. The Rwandan classroom environment includes both teachers and students who may be survivors on the one hand, and those who have families with perpetrators of the genocide, again the Tutsi on the other hand. So, and as I was saying, we used to improvise, and sometimes we go along our emotions, and it is it is dangerous. When I say we, I mean the teachers or the people in charge of education. The other big challenge is related to the informal education in families and communities. You know that there is an issue of informal, or what I can call a hidden curriculum, in which the learning that takes place in the families and the communities sometimes have a very powerful impact on what the children learn in the formal curriculum at school. When children sit with their parents and relatives around the fireplace or somewhere else in the home, the adults may talk about issues which carry contradictory messages quite different from what they receive at school, and sometimes deliberately distorting the truth and the reality to the detriment of the intellectual development and understanding of the children. In conclusion, education is about the acquisition of knowledge, skills, and attitudes. And the education in its true meaning should focus on giving knowledge to the students, help them to develop their skills, and arrive at a change of attitude of the learners and the whole society. And this process helps people to develop positive mind and eradicate negative thinking, which is a source of all kinds of discriminations and hatred. The role of education and how we talk about genocide can be seen in the context of many factors. Some of them are formal, others are informal. And Rwanda doesn't have all the expertise and therefore has to engage with all our partners and stakeholders to continue to find solutions and the way forward as we chart out a course and a new future for our young people in a new Rwanda. In peace education, the Ministry of Education is particularly in partnership with Aegis Trust and the Shoah Foundation through Rwanda Peace Education Program. And these organizations are advising on the appropriateness and relevance of the genocide curriculum, and especially as regards what should be the right methodology to teach genocide. And the Ministry of Education is currently reviewing and overhauling the basic education curriculum with the help of our development partners and stakeholders. And in January 2016, this curriculum will be implemented, and it is hoped that our young people will develop a better understanding of the causes and impact of the genocide. We do hope education will continue to play a central and positive role in healing the Rwandan society, in the reconciliation process, and in the prevention of genocide in our region and elsewhere in the world. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for that comprehensive picture on the progress being made as well as the challenges. The Minister clearly said that in spite of everything else that has been tried, we still have challenges. We still have some questions unanswered. We probably don't have all the right answers. He also did refer specifically to some of the partnerships, including that with the Shoah Foundation. And Dr. Simon, I'll just ask you at this point to come in and share with us some of the work you're doing in this area of education. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be here today, and particularly to share in this week of commemoration, and a privilege to be working with our partners here in Rwanda. I'll just talk a little bit about the organization and the work that we do. The Shoah Foundation, the Institute for Visual History and Education, is an institute within the Dornstein College of Letters, Arts, and Sciences at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles, California. The USC Shoah Foundation's Visual History Archive includes 52,000 videotaped interviews of survivors and other witnesses of the Holocaust, and also includes survivors, rescuers, and other witnesses of the genocide against the Tutsi. This collection of individual narratives represents one of the largest video databases of its kind, 105,000 hours, covering 58 countries and 33 languages, 1.2 million names, and 500,000 images. That's very large. It's a lot of numbers. But what's most important, and what we try to keep at the forefront, is that every single one of those testimonies is a full story of a life of a woman or a man with personal reflections of childhood, beliefs, dreams, fear, sorrow, family, nearly unspeakable trauma, loss, love, survival, and surviving survival, and so many other facets and dimensions of the human experience. This collective voice of conscience is available to us, in part, because of the technology that was employed to reveal it, to digitize it, to index it, to make it discoverable for scholars, educators, and students around the world. And as more and more data is becoming accessible to more and more people around the globe, there are initiatives underway in Europe, the United States, here in Rwanda as well, to preserve cultural heritage, to aggregate data, to catalog materials, to put them online. And we should continue to keep pace with the significant change that is occurring within and around us. But we must also think about the meaning and purpose of what we put online, about the ethics of how we go about providing access, about its curation, about the learning and other outcomes we hope to achieve in doing so. And USC Shoah Foundation finds itself in a particular position by focusing specifically on the learning that can potentially take place from the Visual History Archive. Research, education, and access to the testimonies are the three main areas of our work. And within education about genocide, we explore the broad universal learning outcomes and their relevance to today's youth, rather than a specific historical or disciplinary focus. And in addition to considering what happens to the eyewitness who gives testimony and the learner who watches testimony, the Institute seeks to apply what we learn towards a vital question. Can we measure the process of engagement with testimony that may lead to responsible participation in civil society? We don't take that for granted. How can we contribute effectively to this process? And to begin to respond to and measure the answer to these questions, we need to be able to demonstrate attitudinal and behavioral change that is sustained and sustainable in the global audiences with whom we work, and in particular, teachers and students in this conversation. We implement this work through programs with partners worldwide, operating through partnership in local environments. And as a brief side note, I'll say that the partnership itself, aside and in addition to the target audiences we are reaching, provides tremendous opportunity for capacity building for all involved, and learning, and an opportunity to model together the outcomes we seek. And we partner in two main programs here in Rwanda, the Rwandan Peace Education Program with our partners Aegis Trust, Radio La Benevolencia, my colleague here on the panel at our IRDP. And this particular program is national and aims to contribute to peace building, critical thinking, and resiliency through a wide variety of activities. I'm going to speak briefly about our other program, which aligns with RPEP and is implemented together with Aegis Trust. And it's focused on bringing testimony and education on site to educators and students who visit Kigali Genocide Memorial and Museum, as well as bringing the testimonies directly to teachers and students in classrooms in Rwanda through Eyewitness. An Eyewitness, what is that? It's an educational platform with more than 1,400 testimonies, including those of survivors of the genocide against the Tutsi. Eyewitness is developed for educators and their students ages 13 to 25. It provides an opportunity for students to search the archive of testimonies, watch them, complete multimodal activities, and contribute their own voice, developing knowledge and understanding along with 21st century skills. There are currently more than 5,000 educators and nearly 18,000 educators from 57 countries registered in Eyewitness. Evaluation is an important part of understanding the efficacy of the work, and we have studied the impact of using Eyewitness with a mixed methods approach. And we do this out of the University of Southern California through the Institutional Review Board. And so far, the population under study includes approximately 900 students in 4 countries, including the United States, Italy, Australia, and here in Rwanda. Working with professional evaluators, we've developed a set of instruments that measure attitude and behavior. And Eyewitness in Rwanda specifically involves teacher training of educators from a variety of disciplines, including history, political education, general paper, geography, literature, Kinyarwanda, and English, and an opportunity for students utilizing Eyewitness to engage in a particular learning activity called Understanding Genocide and a Future in its Aftermath. This activity is part of a template and a suite of learning modules, and is called an information quest, through which students learn about the history of genocide, the stages of genocide. They're introduced to testimony of eyewitnesses who survived both the Holocaust and the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. This is an introductory activity. It would be integrated into the broader curriculum of the class. Students read secondary sources, they watch testimony, and other pedagogical videos, they answer questions, and they navigate on their own online through the activity. As a part of their assignment, they'll listen to clips of testimony chosen to illustrate a particular set of themes, including discrimination, propaganda, divisionism, and stereotyping. From these narratives, they will collect words and assign them size and color, indicating the value and importance of the concepts as they have heard and understood them. These words form a word cloud or a word picture, and they then reflect in writing upon their own work product and that of their classmates. In this activity, students also reflect upon what the learning of the past means to them with regards to their future. The outcomes of this activity contribute to students' basic understanding of the genocide against the Tutsi, as well as the Holocaust. Students are introduced and expected to understand Gregory Stanton's 8 stages of genocide, and he's here today and told me that he's developing 10 stages, and I just have a copy of it now, so we'll be able to have a conversation in an iterative process. The UN definition of genocide and the characteristics of a pre-genocidal society. This particular activity aligns with and rolls up into the learning outcomes of the entire Eyewitness in Rwanda program, which includes, among other outcomes, deepening capacity for innovative, creative, and critical thought, development of enhanced problem-solving skills, increasing knowledge and ability to apply new media skills because this is online, the ability to begin to understand genocide, its causes, global context, and continued ramifications, and as a result of all this, to develop a more complex worldview and to foster empathy. This work includes on-site pilots at Kigali Genocide Memorial Center and teacher training, along with teacher-facilitated activities in classrooms. Initial findings suggest that teachers appreciate testimony as a valuable tool to teach about genocide. The voices of the past, even the near past, provide an entree for a sensitive topic. And the lived experience and immediacy of the face and the voice and personal reflection, they say, resonates with students. Through training of teachers, we've also learned that they appreciate the opportunity to develop their own technological skills and to share those and explore them with their students. Finally, teachers who've been trained on Eyewitness have begun to rethink their classroom practices and classroom management and embrace new pedagogical strategies to reach their students. With regards to students, the engagement is not just about showing technology or a tool, although that's very compelling to them and makes it very sticky, as we would say in English. It's about introducing a pathway for students to develop critical thinking skills, to navigate, appreciate, and understanding the importance of considering multiple perspectives. In addition, students indicate that they appreciate the opportunity to learn directly from survivors, even when it is on a video screen, and that what the testimonies tell them is thought-provoking and inspires them to value the voice of the individual. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Simon. Very inspiring. Dr. Fontan, you bring a lot of experience in the area of genocide and peace education. Share with us your contribution to how we talk about genocide as education. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Honorable President of the Senate, Honorable Speaker of Parliament, Members of Parliament, Honorable Minister, and the distinguished guests. Thank you very much for inviting me here today. I'm going to talk principally about peace education in talking about genocide. And in peace education, we use storytelling as a tool of pedagogy. So I'm going to start with a story. Now, we used to live in Costa Rica, and when my daughter was 5 years old, that was 2 years ago, she came home from school and she told me how proud she was that she had been chosen by the teacher to be Queen Isabel of Spain in the school play. To commemorate, I quote, the 12th of October 1492, which is the day of encounter of cultures. So she was going to help commemorate how she called it, how Queen Isabel brought a language and food to the indigenous people of the Americas. So I felt compelled to talk to her about genocide and tell her what had happened in that beautiful day of encounter of cultures. And I told her, in a way, to talk to a 5-year-old, how this encounter of cultures resulted in the killing of more than 90% of the population, the indigenous population of the Americas. And so she went back to school the next day, and she didn't want to be the queen anymore. And she was demoted to being a boat. So I think that when we talk about genocide, we first have to understand that we shouldn't take it for granted, that there are many genocides around the world that are not being talked about, and that I think is quite politically extremely courageous to actually decide to talk about genocide in a school curriculum. So I'm going to quote my distinguished colleague Jerry Kaplan, who is not here with us today, but I think that he makes a very important, he writes a very important quote. He says, "Genocide never ends when the killing is ended. In a multiplicity of ways, its consequences continue to be felt for years, decades, or generations. Much of Rwandan life today, and that of the entire Great Lakes region of Africa, is a product of the 100 days of genocide." So what is the role of education in schools? And what do we mean by education? Talking about genocide, do we refer to it as our past, as our present, or as our imminent future? If we chose to go that route, then how do we manage to bring hope to our pupils and students in relation to their future life? In the past year, I've been to Syria and Myanmar. In Myanmar, a country with great natural resources, I have documented a peace process validated by the Global North, in the international corporations, international organizations, and what I like to call the peace industry. All ethnic groups there are encouraged by us, the Global North, to make peace, while the government reinforces its military outposts on their territories, purchases helicopters from the Chinese, and powerful ammunition that has already initiated the brutal and systematic killing of some of these groups, all while it is still negotiating peace and undergoing a process of democratization. The Global North is abandoning many ethnic groups in Myanmar, the Karen, the Kachin, the Rohingya, and many others. Myanmar is another disaster not just waiting to happen. Should we be opening our eyes, we would recognize that it has already started. We therefore cannot possibly say never again when talking about genocide. Or if we still insist about saying never again, then we may say never again should we trust power to defend us. So I will argue here that peace education comes as an opportunity for individuals, as opposed to states, to reinforce a South-South dialogue on genocide. Peace education can be our local solution to our local issues. It can free us from ourselves. So what is it exactly? Understandingly, peace is in the eyes of the beholder. It can mean many different things to many different people. It can be established as a governmental curriculum in terms of reconciliation and a common identity. And/or it can focus on the past with a vision towards the future. As seen in Myanmar, peace can mean all and its contrary. Peace can also be deeply political. Peace education combines not only an education for peace, but as importantly, an education with peace. And it's all about pedagogy too. Grounded in the works of Paulo Freire and Augusto Boal and liberation theologians of Latin America, it makes the radical proposition to educate the oppressed into transforming their lives. Its three main pillars are dialogue, conscientization, and praxis. So dialogue. It reinforces the establishment of a communal narrative around issues that pertain to that community's needs. School curriculum no longer focuses on how to educate the future working poor into operating the machinery and taking the orders of the globalized business elite. It establishes priorities that serve the common good. Crucially, it can no longer indoctrinate future soldiers into becoming cannon fodder when a war is in the order of the day. Conscientization. It allows communities to develop a deep understanding of their social, political, and economic conditions, so as to reinforce values of solidarity and greater social justice. It fosters the establishment of systematic critical thinking reflexes on part of the student population, which is no longer a passive recipient of knowledge, but a contributor to that knowledge in which it has vested interests. Praxis. It shatters the traditional establishment of values as not being inherently coherent with one's daily lives. It bridges the map and the territory into encouraging the oppressed to put what he or she has learned into practice. The oppressed is no longer a spectator of life. He and she becomes active at their local level. The professor too becomes an activist and is no longer confined into an ivory tower. So how is peace education expressed in schools? From a structural perspective, it seeks to strengthen various core values into the traditional curriculum. It means that one can teach mathematics with a peace education pedagogy. Those values are the dismantlement of a culture of war, the learning to live with compassion and justice, the building of intercultural solidarity, the fostering of fundamental human rights, the learning to live in harmony with nature, and the consolidation of inner peace. All of those can be part of every different part of the curriculum. Those values are certainly to the core of building a peaceful and sustainable society for tomorrow. As an example, the dismantlement of a culture of war at the school level goes into the promotion of cooperation over competition. Grades are no longer valid as they are seen to reinforce division, competition, and hierarchies, all bearing the hallmarks of organized violence. As educators, we teach in a divisive way. We end up dividing to conquer and eventually educating towards values of conflict as opposed to cooperation and peace. Peace education, transformative education, critical pedagogy can be seen as revolutionary. They ought to be seen as deeply inclusive. True, one of their main proponents is a Peruvian Jesuit called Felipe MacGregor, who in the 1980s was crucially linking peace education with anti-imperialism. Those were the Reagan years of repression in Latin America. His work has since been co-opted by UNESCO, which has defanged it of most of its political undertones. Let us be reassured. Peace education after a genocide, therefore, makes the fundamental assertion that we as educators do not need our children to be divided, because our role is not to rule over them. It is to give them the tools to critically think before they act, so that we at our local level can say never again and mean it in our personal and collective actions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fontan. You spoke about hope for the future and the present. You spoke about communities and societies and the influences between the formal and the informal. Dr. Munyandamutsa, you've done some work and you follow developments in this area, and you live and work with people in these communities and societies that have to live with certain realities. Talk to us about that. Thank you.
Thank you. I will make my presentation in French. J'ai toujours pensé qu'enseigner revient à transmettre. Mais nous savons aussi qu'on transmet ce qu'on a. Et ce qu'on a façonné, et ce qu'on a hérité à travers la chaîne de transmission sans fin. On aime dire chez nous, kutaraganiriye na se atamenya icyo sekuru yasize avuze. Quiconque n'a pas eu la chance de parler avec son père ne saura jamais ce qu'a laissé comme héritage son grand-père. Vous le savez aussi, on transmet ce qu'on est devenu, mais aussi et parfois ce ce que la société a fait de nous. Que sommes-nous donc devenus? Et que possédons-nous comme héritage sur lequel nous pouvons compter pour transmettre? Dans le Rwanda de l'après-génocide, au lendemain de la fin du monde, on a assisté à un mouvement migratoire impressionnant, du dedans vers le dehors et du dehors vers le dedans, entraînant un bousculement des langues et des cultures. Ces bouleversements ont aussi modifié le regard porté aussi bien sur le passé que sur le futur, ce qui a suscité des tensions riches, mais inquiétantes, qui ont marqué le processus de reconstruction de la société. Tout était bouleversement au sein de cette société qui est la nôtre, prise dans un mouvement migratoire pluriel. Certains rentraient de la fuite récente, d'autres fêtaient la victoire du retour après de longues années d'exclusion. Et quand on survivant, ils étaient et sont toujours à la recherche d'une juste distance pour faire de la survivance un tremplin, pour se remettre en mouvement. Car si ces bouleversements et que cette société a subi sur base quotidienne revêtent plusieurs significations, rien n'indique, comme le souligne Roisin, qu'ils aient un sens. Si par sens, on se réfère à la triple notion de fondement, d'unité et de finalité. De fondement, c'est-à-dire de principe de base sur lequel s'appuie un projet collectif. D'unité ensuite, c'est-à-dire de rassemblement d'images du monde dans un schéma d'ensemble cohérent. De finalité enfin, c'est-à-dire de projection vers un ailleurs réputé meilleur. Parler du génocide à la nouvelle génération en marche, c'est se doter de la capacité de dire et de nommer ce qu'il a détruit, ce qu'il a remis en question, et réinstaurer ainsi les valeurs fondatrices de la société, de l'unité vers une finalité qui consisterait à s'engager sur le chemin de la transformation. Une transformation sur l'échelle individuelle, mais aussi au niveau collectif. Plusieurs actes ont été posés. La justice de proximité d'abord, pour donner à la communauté la chance de réinventer la culture. Celle de la justice d'abord, et affirmer l'impératif de la mémoire. La mémoire, en effet, à travers les commémorations, les mémoriaux et la transformation d'une éducation, visa le changement des citoyens. La responsabilité de l'État était énorme, et le reste. Il consistait avant tout à créer une société réconciliée. Mais comment réconcilier une société sidérée face à une proximité avec l'inimaginable des humains, pour reprendre les mots de Pierre Fédida? Ici, il y a un besoin impérieux de prise de distance. Distance qui n'est pas toujours géographique, parce que ce n'est pas possible ici. mais qui requiert la possibilité de s'octroyer le langage propre, qu'on ne construit que face à celui de l'autre, à condition qu'il véhicule la possibilité de l'espoir de se recréer face à l'autre, afin de mettre en échec le projet d'anéantissement. Nous sommes ici face à l'obligation que chacun se donne pour survivre, pour être réparé, l'obligation de refuser le vide et de créer la présence et l'absence, de créer du récit, donner corps à une mémoire sans souvenir, qui ne peut advenir que face au tiers étranger qui jouerait ici le rôle du mur de représentation. À l'absence de la possibilité de créer un État réconcilié pour accéder à une véritable transformation sociale, les survivants se sentent si seuls dans un univers désertique. Toutes les créations sociétales, dans un tel contexte, un contexte où il y a eu projet d'anéantissement, on procède par des actes de réparation, à l'image de la sagesse de la poésie africaine, car leur tâche, les poètes ici, c'est de se souvenir, comme disait Antige Krog, des points d'eau, de l'étendue de chaque mare. La survie du groupe dépend des points d'eau dans le désert. Il faut les mémoriser. Enseigner le génocide, c'est savoir créer les points d'eau dans le désert. C'est marquer les repères. C'est mobiliser la mémoire, quelle qu'en soit la douleur. Presque comme le souligne si subtilement Janine Altonia, cet enfant de survivant du génocide arménien. La douleur à sentir atrocement vivre en nous, à notre mémoire, les images ou alors les paroles des défunts, devenus reproductibles et donc partageables, s'accompagne tout de même de l'impression que nous n'y comprenons plus rien. Ces gestes survivent étrangement aux êtres qui leur insufflaient vie. Ils demeurent actifs à nous, qui en restons ainsi secrètement et à jamais les exclusifs détenteurs. Quand on survit d'un projet d'extermination, la survivance va être fonction de ce qu'on va acquérir comme héritage et qu'on va prendre avec soi afin de pouvoir devenir le vecteur de transmission de la mémoire des exclus. La survivance convoque un double impératif, celui relatif à la conception des mondes autres, nécessita un nouveau langage qui se construit face à celui de l'autre. Et celui, plus essentiel encore, de l'acquisition des langages propres, qui permettra d'historiciser sa victimologie comme un événement et non plus comme une manière de vivre, parce que c'est dur et c'est difficile de vivre comme victime. Il faut souligner cependant qu'à la suite du génocide, dans un contexte post-destruction, l'État a entrepris avec la dernière énergie de remettre les pièces ensemble, les unes aux autres, pour recréer le pays comme un acte de réparation. Enseigner et faire comprendre aux citoyens que la meilleure manière d'exister, c'est laisser vivre son voisin. C'est John Mbiti qui disait « Je suis parce que nous sommes ». Et puisque nous sommes, donc je suis. Joyce Sayen disait récemment « Si j'ose écrire aujourd'hui tous les mots qui sont tus et tous les cris qui tuent, je le dois à la distance prise avec les attitudes sectaires des milieux que j'ai traversés et qui m'ont fait souffrir jadis. » C'est donc notre responsabilité aujourd'hui, après 20 ans, d'apprendre à enseigner tous ces mots qui nous ont tués pour réinventer les actions qui vont nous recréer, afin d'éviter l'obscurcissement de la mémoire vivifiante par la mémoire traumatique, afin d'échapper, dans la mesure du possible, à ce triste constat d'une survivante du ghetto de Varsovie, qui disait ceci: « Rien, ou presque rien, ne m'est resté de mon enfance d'avant la guerre. Rien ne m'a poussé vers l'avenir. Seul on subsistait, net, comme moi-même, insistante, insupportable, inévitable, ces quelques années d'il y a maintenant plus de 50 ans, gravées à moi, ineffaçable. Depuis, le temps piétine. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Dr. Munyandamutsa, for taking us through a very detailed presentation on the phenomena, what the genocide has made us, the need to have a common and appropriate language, what needs to be done to survive. Before we open the floor for a general discussion, I would like to invite Professor Warren Critchlow from the University of York, from the Faculty of Education, to tell us how the things that Dr. Munyandamutsa has mentioned, and the other panelists as well, can be done, how we can address some of the challenges mentioned through art. Dr. Critchlow, kindly raise your hand so you can be given a microphone. Thank you. Just press the button in front of you.
Thank you so much, members of Parliament, dignitaries, guests, colleagues, fellow panelists. I'm very happy to be here. In fact, I'm very honored to be here with you today. This is a tremendously important event and a very deep learning experience for me, a teacher who is very committed to teaching genocide and trying to learn how to teach it well. 20 years later, how do we talk about teaching genocide in the classroom? I want to speak as a professor of education from Canada, where we have our own collective histories of loss. Here I'm thinking of the histories of the First Nations people, underwritten by genocidal loss, displacement, and trauma that accompany processes of nation formation. But our experience in Canada is not the specific experience of Rwanda. This difference leads me to consider what it means to learn from the 1994 Rwandan genocide against the Tutsi, what it might mean to teach about not only the specificity of Rwanda's genocide, as an interconnected part of my own history, but teach genocide more generally. I don't have definitive answers to this large problem, although what I do want to talk about has something to do with a major theme of this conference and some of the things that my fellow panelists have been also talking about in their remarks, remarks that have been addressing questions of art, of the image, of the archive, video testimony, peace education, the problem of becoming a teacher as an activist, developing an inner distance towards our pedagogical practice. As a university teacher in education, I come belatedly to draw on Rwanda's genocide to generate broad-ranging critical perspectives on teaching genocide, and particularly, and this is a very strong interest of mine, particularly the after effects of genocide for people and for our global political culture. In considering the task of teaching genocide, I take some guidance from a question posed by the anthropologist Clifford Geertz some years ago when he asked, how do we understand understandings that are not directly our own? For most of us who attempt the task of teaching genocide, particularly outside of Rwanda, and I'm reminded of this in some discussions I'm having with the young independent filmmakers here in Kigali, who say very clearly that they make films that are stories coming not only about Rwanda, but of Rwanda. But people here know these stories. They hope that the stories that they tell will have some impact on us outside of Rwanda. So for most of us who attempt to teach genocide outside Rwanda, the physical violence and emotionally overwhelming trauma of genocidal action against our person, our identity, whatever it may be, is foreign. Indeed, it's almost unthinkable. I'm not at all suggesting that to teach genocide requires intimate experience with genocide. What I do want to suggest is that to teach genocide, even to consider teaching genocide, including its future prevention, which perhaps is a much more uncertain outcome of our pedagogical practice, requires something more than just teaching the facts. I suggest this something more entails a spirit of solidarity, a spirit of open-mindedness, a creative, committed, generative practice that aims beyond teaching genocide as merely a consumptive approach, as one of my colleagues on the panel said already, as transmission, or teaching it in a conservative manner, simply concerned with information distribution. That is, information distribution mired in melancholy, in the empirical, in simplified explanations, teaching that locates genocide as existing elsewhere, far from our homes and disconnected from us personally, somehow about them or those people, those other cultures over there, teaching genocide that is circumscribed by hidebound certainties of explanation, an understanding that lacks passion or responsibility. Alternatively, I want to suggest that teaching genocide certainly requires, on the part of the teacher, development of thorough disciplinary knowledge, and this, in fact, may be a lifelong inquiry into the human history of genocide and its specific modern conflagrations. Also required is a capacity to approach these social and historical matters with what I call sensory depth. That is, regarding our awareness of mass state-sponsored violence against targeted groups, the socio-psychic effects and after-effects of such violence, the death of victims and the dispossessed lives of survivors, as well as perpetrators with whom survivors must continue to share a world and together necessarily make a better future. Sensory depth requires an awareness that genocide does not occur in other places, times, worlds of experience and politics other than our own. Rather, genocide anywhere in the world is connected and interconnected to us, here and now. As members of the modern world with others, genocide is a facet of our history, and overcoming its conditions as an always just under the surface political response to conflict is integral to who we are as human beings on this planet, and to all the nations in which we live, and to what we as a species might still become. Now, our teaching genocide, in my sense, is characterized by the difficulty of belatedness, and we teach genocide in the shadows or the aftermaths of these events, after the suffering of masses of others, and after the narrative hindsight, like Monday morning quarterbacking, authored by others. The sensory depth that I mentioned earlier entails an awareness of the long-term trauma genocide produces. Our teaching must always carry the past of genocide forward into the present without inflicting deeper hurt or wounding the student with helplessness. Rather, our teaching must aim to help students who are thinking well about the possible, to encourage her or him to grasp the meaning of responsibility, that is, responsibility for fighting for justice, of thoughtful, determined, committed action towards peaceful settlement of conflicts, and to maintain vigilance toward preventing the recurrence of genocide in the future. Now, part of my work here has involved speaking with emerging independent filmmakers here in Kigali, and the work they are doing, I can tell you, is really quite amazing. These young people without a lot of resources and, in fact, little formal education are beginning to tell, as I said, stories that are not only about Rwanda, but of Rwanda, drawing on a certain kind of sensory depth of their experience. I want to suggest that for us outside of Rwanda, we need these stories in our pedagogical practice. We need the kind of voices, the kind of images, the kind of stories, the kind of colors that engage us and help us to develop our own sense, to make our own forms of solidarity, even from a distance with what is happening here. Artists are opening, I think, for us, a vital resource for considering the Rwandan subject, the second generation and third generation experience, those young people who are building on loss to claim a generative image of the self, a new image of the self, and the sense of professionalism that is not just local, but also highly competitive internationally. Now, I just want to try to wrap up by making just one final point. Teaching genocide is certainly a tall order, and as I suggested earlier, there are no guarantees. As the political philosopher Hannah Arendt understood from her studies of the vulnerability of society when it has lost its capacity or respect for thinking, she observed that teaching cannot and should not indoctrinate the student. Rather, what thoughtful, engaged teaching can aim to do is to arouse or awaken an awareness of the political consequences of not taking seriously the need to develop responsible thought and action about societal acts of genocide. From our teaching, we cannot control what students do or what they may become or what they may or may not do in their future. For Arendt, the best hope we might have as an outcome of our teaching genocide is that certain extreme things that are actual consequences of non-thinking will not be capable of arising. At least arising in us as individuals, where responsibility actually begins. What do we do in teaching genocide will find its measure not in paper and pencil tests, but in those moments when responsible judgment is required in the face of moral collapse or political crisis, where the values and standards that otherwise make a shared communal world have all but evaporated, and we are really left on our own. That is how we act responsibly. That is when we learn that we can act responsibly from the various positions we occupy when the chips are really down. We have examples of this consciousness too, this capacity to say no among many in Rwanda. And I was so taken by the comments of the judge earlier when he said this very thing, that people here stood up, they said no, they went to the aid of their fellow countrymen, they helped people to survive. We need, in our teaching, to return to this kind of consciousness, this kind of sensory depth. We need this guidance from this kind of experience. Finally, I just want to say that if the capacity to remember and the capacity to teach and think well about genocide comes from places of creativity and from the artists and from the museums and from curatorial practice, then we ought to turn to the Kigali Memorial Center, where at the very end of that moving exhibition, I read the following words: "Education has become our way forward. The main memorial sites all have education programs to ensure that the coming generation understand the mistake of our forefathers, so that they are given a chance to think about their values. We need to learn about the past. We also need to learn from it." Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Critchlow, President of the Senate, Madam Speaker, ladies and gentlemen. The floor is now open for questions, comments. Kindly raise your hand, introduce yourself, and use 1 minute to ask your question so that we have time for as many people as possible. I see a hand over there.
I'm happy to speak without the mic. Thank you very much. My name is Pumla Gobodo Matikizela. I have been struck by a number of presentations, but I want to focus mostly on the comments of Dr. Munyandamutsa. The conversation about the effects of genocide and other kinds of political violence as in trauma is very rare in these kinds of conversations and conferences. So I appreciate very much your refocusing on attention on the importance of stories and the importance of the traumatic consequences of genocide and similar incidents. I would like to make a couple of present two questions to you. The first has to do with the general trend of the debates around genocide regarding the issue of remembering. Now, most of the people here understand that the Holocaust has become a kind of standard in terms of the research and findings that have been made around the Holocaust. And there are many canonical texts that have become kind of a Bible for these kinds of experiences, traumatic experiences. One of the important points you made when you spoke about the significance of telling stories and remembering is that we remember, we tell the stories, so that the stories do not necessarily define us and re-traumatize us, but rather they become part of our life. But you went beyond that. You said it's not only about remembering, it's also about reconnecting with the other. Now, that is a very important point, I believe, for communities and societies where victims, survivors live together in the same country, and sometimes, especially in this country, as neighbors. So this issue of telling the story, remembering, and then facing the other. Is there any discussion in Rwanda about how this very insight informs the way we write in the scholarship and in our researches, the way we write about the important insights that have emerged and are emerging from Rwanda in the way that Rwandans are responding to the pain and suffering of genocide? Is there any language? You're speaking about the language of trauma, language of people speaking about the trauma. Is there a language that is beginning to emerge on how to write about these insights from the experiences in Rwanda? The second question I have is very brief and concerns the period of commemoration. When people have suffered these experiences, the victims and survivors bring their memories into the sites of remembering through telling testimonies and remembering the trauma of the genocide. Do you have experience of people slipping back into a state of uncontrollable trauma as a result of the week-long genocide? And if so, what mechanisms are in place in Rwanda for you to respond as professionals, for you to respond to these experiences? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kumla. Let's get 3 more questions, comments, and then we'll have the panelists respond. Yes, I see a hand over there towards the right, middle.
Thank you. I'm called Narcisse Musavezu. I'm a senator here in Rwanda. I first thank the presenters. After listening to the presenters, I start imagining whether in Rwanda we shall say never again. Why am I saying this? Because after the Minister of Education presented what Rwanda is doing, he is doing what it can to try to see never again. But then there is a generation that is in dilemma. Somebody who was born, now he's 20, he's got a family which doesn't believe in what the Minister of Education is saying. The young man or the young lady goes to school and then the teacher says this and that. And this is the generation that is coming. Many have people outside who don't even accept that genocide against Tutsi happened. That means they are teaching their sons and daughters against what we are saying. And these are Rwandans. I wanted to say, like the Minister of Justice said this morning, how do we create the Alain Gauthier in education so that these people outside can be so educated? Like the Minister of Education is trying to go to prison, or the country is trying to go to prison, to the society, to create different aspects, to try to see that Rwanda should say genocide should not happen again. But we shall not say this word. You should go to other people who don't accept what you are saying, who even deny that genocide against us happened. And these people are getting children. These people are getting families. And Rwanda will not deny them, will not just refuse them. They are Rwandans. Meaning that one day or the other day they will come. How can the world help us? How can the world help Rwanda to say genocide will never happen again? Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Let's come to the front here.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. My name is Dora Byamukama. I'm an Yala member, an East African of Uganda origin. At Yala, we have passed several motions on the issue of genocide. And one of the subjects we've touched upon is the issue of archives. Since education goes hand in hand with research, I'd like to find out whether there's an effort, first and foremost, to ensure that there's a library or archives which collect all this information. This morning we're hearing about courts in the different countries, and more importantly, the ICTR aspect, whether it could be reviewed and maybe moved to a UN agency so that people feel freer and it's easier for them to access this. This is my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Byamukama. Let's get one there. And there's, believe, Honorable Rukumbura.
Thank you, Moderator. I cannot miss this opportunity after Honorable from Yara. But before that, I have a gentleman here who has impressed me most. This gentleman happened to be the deputy to the air who refused to abandon Rwandans when they were at their darkest hour. Thank you, sir. In conjunction to what his Edao, in conjunction to the question Honorable from East African community asked, I was struggling with that question. Do we have a place we call the center of all that happened to us, where anyone from anywhere around the globe, if they need any material for teaching, for any other research, they would run to? Do we have a place whereby our kids and our grandkids will come to when they need that material? To me, that should be an institute of genocide in Rwanda. 20 years, some of these profs will almost be close to my age and becoming a bit forgetful. So we need the material before they become forgetful. So dear profs, locally and internationally, do something about it, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's come back to the panelists. In no particular order, please feel free to comment. Honorable Minister.
Thank you. Maybe I'll comment on Honorable Musabe's question. Should we say never again when you have that what I have called the hidden curriculum? So we should say yes, never again, but we should combine all the strategies. I have discussed about the formal education, but there is also the informal education system we have developed through various institutions like the National Unity and Reconciliation Commission, the National Itorero Commission, which is dealing with the reconciliation program as well, and which is teaching Rwandans about our traditional values. You know about this in the Munyandamutsa program. That is a way of dealing with this hidden curriculum to make sure that our education is going down to the grassroots and it is not kept in schools. We need to follow the kids who are teaching in our classrooms to find them in their families and to make sure that the families are receiving the same messages or they are challenged on some of the thinkings. So that's the way it should work, and the education should not be limited to the Ministry of Education. I know that the Parliament is contributing to that effort as well. So we need to look at the formal education, but to take into consideration the other mechanisms which are helping in dealing with this hidden curriculum I was referring to. Another thing is that we need to keep in mind is that this is a process we are referring to. We cannot go into classrooms, teach, test, give marks, and think that you have done our job. Reconciliation is a process, and we need to take our time. We need to know that we shall never stop to say never again. We have said it in the last 20 years, but we are going to say it in the next 20 years to come. That's where I think that we need to consider the formal education at school level, but we need to consider other mechanisms to deal with the community level as well. I thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Dr. Munyandamutsa.
Vous savez, au Rwanda, le contexte dans lequel le génocide s'est produit, je ne l'apprends à personne, est bien particulier. Parce que quelques heures après, les survivants, ceux qui avaient échappé à la mort, les tueurs, tous étaient amenés à vivre ensemble dès le lendemain. Nous le savons, il est difficile de faire un deuil et de l'amorcer dans de bonnes conditions sans disposer de la possibilité de prendre distance. Parce que c'est cette distance-là qui vous permet de vous regarder dans le cadre et dans le contexte de tuerie, qui vous permet de prendre distance un tout petit peu et de voir ce que vous pouvez créer pour continuer. Cette distance n'est pas possible ici. Mais en même temps, on serait tenté d'imaginer que forcément, fatalement, parce que nous ne disposons pas de cette distance, le chemin du deuil est difficile ou n'est pas accessible. Je crois que c'est Nietzsche qui a l'habitude de dire « ce qui ne vous tue pas, vous consolide ». Ça a été une expérience unique de pouvoir apprendre à créer son indépendance, sa liberté de vie dans un espace extrêmement réduit. Et les gens ont été consolidés pour ça. Pourtant, il y avait en deçà, de façon non verbalisée, de façon non exprimée, une espèce de négociation malsaine, c'est-à-dire « tais-toi pour qu'on vive ensemble ». Et cette négociation était là, qui n'était pas exprimée. Alors comment en même temps se taire et regarder en avant? Comment en même temps répondre au devoir de mémoire, alors que se rappeler, ça signifie pointer du doigt l'autre qui m'a fait ça, qui a fait comme ça. Toute cette complexité de l'exercice de la mémoire fait que nous sommes tout le temps en train d'inventer et que nous devons effectivement mettre en ensemble de façon conceptualisée, de façon organisée, l'expérience acquise au Rwanda. Et parfois, nous avons l'habitude de dire que c'est important d'aller au rendez-vous de la mémoire. On va au rendez-vous de la mémoire. Mais comment ça se passe? De quoi nous rappelons-nous? Est-ce que nous sommes conscients que parfois, la mémoire est traumatique? Et quand elle est traumatique, elle ne nous aide pas à nous reconstruire. Je crois que c'est important de pouvoir travailler sur les différentes stratégies et voir comment, au-delà de la mémoire traumatique, nous pouvons construire une mémoire constructrice qui signifie aller convoquer, comme je le disais dans mon exposé, la présence d'absence. Les gens qui ne sont plus là, mais qui ont un jour été là et qui ont donné quelque chose, qui ont laissé une espèce de legacy, une espèce d'héritage. Et cette manière de faire ou de travailler, de réfléchir, et nous amène à chaque année et constamment à nous interroger, à ouvrir le débat, à savoir ce que ça veut dire quand nous nous rappelons, et à savoir ce que ça veut dire quand on convoque les gens, quand on invite les gens au rendez-vous de la mémoire. J'ai l'habitude de voir que parfois, à l'occasion des journées comme celle-ci, ou comme ça aura lieu lundi, qu'on essaie de convaincre les gens à aller témoigner, de les convaincre, j'allais dire presque même à certains égards de les forcer de témoigner. Vous savez, le témoignage est un acte d'accusation, en quelque sorte. C'est un acte pour lequel il faut s'être préparé. C'est un acte, quand on témoigne, parce qu'on ouvre des perspectives dans ce monde intérieur qu'il faut faire dans une logique d'intimité. Une logique d'intimité qui permet que vous êtes sûr que vous avez un destinataire de votre témoignage, que vous avez un destinataire qui vous écoute, qui vous organise, qui permet que vous puissiez regarder à travers ses yeux qu'il veut que vous existiez. Parce que tant que l'autre ne veut pas que vous existiez, ça devient un défi énorme de pouvoir se recréer. Se recréer parce qu'on a été détruit. Se recréer, c'est tout un processus, c'est toute une démarche. D'habitude, nous ne nous créons pas. Nous sommes créés par nos parents, par le bon Dieu. Mais dans un contexte post-génocide, nous sommes invités à nous recréer. Nous recréer dans la proximité avec l'autre, dans la connexion avec l'autre, dans le regard de l'autre, dans la communauté et même la politique qui nous permet, qui nous donne la possibilité d'oublier un peu. Je dis souvent qu'il est difficile de se rappeler quand on n'oublie pas un peu. Et la société, quand elle vous permet d'étudier, d'aller à l'école, quand elle vous permet de travailler, quand elle vous permet de danser, c'est une manière d'oublier un peu pour procéder au travail de la mémoire. Pour revenir à la deuxième interrogation, et à l'occasion des commémorations par exemple, et nous avons l'habitude, nous le verrons aussi et bientôt, nous avons commencé à le voir, de voir les gens qui éclatent dans une espèce de crise traumatique, de crise d'Ihahamuka. Et j'ai, comme professeur de thèse, j'ai un doctorant qui est en train de travailler, qui est en train de finaliser maintenant. Donc, la première défense vient d'être faite en Belgique, qui travaille sur ce phénomène, parce que c'est un phénomène assez particulier. C'est un phénomène assez troublant. Il est en train de travailler, nous sommes en train de travailler là-dessus. Et ce que je peux partager un petit peu, il s'appelle Darius Igishoma, c'est que souvent, ces crises traumatiques est une modalité de communication. C'est une modalité de communication et parfois sans destinataire. C'est une communication aux politiques, c'est une communication à la communauté, une communication aux voisins. Et le problème, c'est comme quand on frappe à une porte. Quand on vous ouvre, vous n'avez plus besoin de frapper. Mais quand on ne vous ouvre pas, vous continuez à frapper. Et j'ai l'impression qu'à certains égards, il y a comme un dialogue de sourds. Les gens éclatent en crise traumatique. Et ils ne sont pas pris, ils ne sont pas contenus dans l'après-coup. Et nous avons un rendez-vous après 9 mois, presque 9 mois de gestation. Et donc, le jour d'éclater, donc on ne laisse aucune place à savoir qu'est-ce qu'il voulait dire celui-là, qu'est-ce qu'il voulait communiquer dans cette manière de communiquer extrêmement complexe. Et je crois que c'est ça que nous allons essayer d'analyser, essayer de proposer, j'allais dire, non pas un guideline, c'est difficile d'avoir un guideline, mais de proposer quelques indications aux gens qui ont la responsabilité de la mémoire pour faire que la mémoire puisse être une mémoire qui nous construit, mais pas une mémoire qui nous détruit. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. Time is not in our favor, but I would like to request somebody from CNLG, the Executive Secretary, or somebody else to comment on the issue of preservation and archiving. And Dr. Simon could also say something on that thereafter. Yes, go ahead, please.
Yes, I don't want to speak on behalf of the Secretary-General of CNLG. If he's here, then I will stand aside, but until we identify him, what I would like to do is agree very much with the speakers that made the interventions about the need to document and archive. It is absolutely essential that we invest in this, we put our energies into this, and I want to give some measure of reassurance that there are experts in this chamber, as well as our partners from the University of Southern California, the Shoah Foundation. There is the NEOD are represented here from the Netherlands, and the University of Texas Archives and Libraries, who've been working with the Aegis Trust over the past few years to develop some infrastructure and capacity. It's early days, but a feasibility study has been undertaken for CNLG, who commissioned us to look at what the possibilities are of bringing together different archives. But this will require a lot of investment. We need to be committed to it, here in Rwanda, but as the international community, and link up with, researchers and experts around the world. I'm sitting next to Stephen Katz, who himself, he helped open up archives in Europe, some 180 million documents related to the Second World War. These people are here, and we need to get together. We need to you know, have a serious plan going ahead. I'd be delighted if anybody here wants to come to the Kigali Genocide Memorial on Tuesday, the 8th of April. There will be something of a presentation about the current archives and a glimpse into the future of what could be achieved. But this is part of a conversation, and please join hands together with us. There is a huge amount to do. We've got a responsibility to create this, not just for today, not for the next 5 years, but in perpetuity, because you're correct. This is a repository of knowledge, and it's that knowledge that researchers will access to help create understanding way beyond our time, 50 years, 100 years from now, and it will be that understanding that will help to inform education and help to inform policymakers on how better to prevent these mass atrocities. So we'll talk more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have to bring this session to an end. I'm going to request all the panelists to use just 2 minutes to make their closing remarks. And I also want to remind that the next session has a bigger component on research. Somebody asked about the research component, so maybe some of the questions can be answered there. Let's start on this side.
Juste dire une chose et montrer à quel point la responsabilité de tous les acteurs sociaux ici est engagée. En utilisant une métaphore que mon doctorat avait utilisée, en utilisant la métaphore du rond-point, où il y a une dense circulation, mais sans code de la route. Vous pouvez imaginer que les collisions sont énormes et multiples. Je crois qu'on a commencé dans un contexte comme celui-là. Et petit à petit, les gens ont commencé à créer le code, à mettre des repères pour qu'il y ait de moins en moins de collisions. En termes de mémoire, la mémoire avec laquelle nous devons apprendre à vivre, mais la mémoire aussi, que qu'on le veuille ou pas, nous sommes amenés à transmettre. Il y a besoin qu'on s'assoie encore une fois, qu'on essaie de raffiner le code de conduite pour que cette mémoire ne soit pas seulement une histoire de quelque chose à la mode, mais quelque chose que nous pouvons parvenir peut-être à maîtriser pour en faire une leçon à transmettre au monde.
Well, it's very difficult after so much eloquence to follow you, but I would like to say that trying to retake all the points that were made, that the rest of the world has a lot to learn from Rwanda and from what has been achieved in the past 20 years. And I really would like, for there to be a program for scholars like me to come in and learn about, what it means to reform your curriculum, what it means to, to reform your justice system. Everything that's been achieved in the past 20 years, I think, needs to be also systematically taught to the rest of the world, because our capacities also in our different environments need to be built. In relation to archiving, I just wanted to mention that the Salam Institute in Washington, D.C. and the University of Dohuk are starting a small project on the role of the Muslims during the genocide. And so if anybody here is willing to cooperate, please let me know, because we are really looking for as many collaborators as possible here in Rwanda. Thank you.
Okay, so I really appreciated the two comments about archives. I mentioned archive when I was talking about education because they're inextricably linked. And it is about when you have material such as personal life stories and you have attendant material around it, it is living, and it lives when it is used and applied in education. So infrastructure, when we talk about collection, when we talk about digitization, when we talk about indexing, when we talk about accessibility and preservation, what comes right after that is education, and it's a loop. And I guess to say that we're committed to being partners, as we have been in the past and will continue to do so in the future, to pick up on what James was saying earlier, this is not a 3 to 5 year process. Although it's urgent, it's a generational process. This is about the next generation. If we're talking about change, which you were talking about, change takes time. And it happens in small moments that happen informally and formally. And the moments that are in the stories, the life stories, both of Rwandans, survivors of the genocide against the Tutsi, survivors of other genocides, of the Holocaust, those moments, they reach young people. They have impact. And when you wrap that with context, appropriate historical context, and respect for the history, and you connect those two with other skills, there is a possibility, that's what our hypothesis, that it will sustain. Thank you.
Education is about dealing with the genocide, the consequences, and it is about preventing genocide as well. And it is not easy to teach genocide. As a matter of fact, in Rwanda, we are teaching while we are learning ourselves about the genocide. We cannot say that we know about the genocide, therefore we can teach genocide. We are learners ourselves. And I believe that we need to join hands with various stakeholders to find the right way to teach genocide. And we need to consider both formal and informal education. And as Minister of Education, we are ready to build partnerships with any well-wishing organizations to achieve our objectives. And if we achieve them, never again will have a meaning in Rwanda and elsewhere in the world. I thank you.
Thank you very much. President of the Senate, Madam Speaker, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this session was intended to emphasize the role of education as we remember for the 20th time. There's so much we could discuss on this topic. There are different ways we can come together in the loop to make sure that we're saying what we should be saying, how we should be saying it, to whom we should be saying it. And together we know that we can remember the way we should be remembering at the various levels if we pull our efforts together. So please join me in thanking our panelists. Thank you very much. This session has come to an end, but I have been asked to make this announcement. There is coffee outside, but because we are pressed for time, please pick a cup and come back for the next session. Thank you.